Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to let everybody hop into the meeting. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. We have lots of different homeschooling families from across the United States with us tonight. So we're just super excited. If you are from Virginia, I would love if you could put that in the chat for us. Dargan and Rebecca and I are from Virginia, and we see a lot of you guys when we go to the HEAV conference in June. And so we'd love to say hi. We've got some Maryland folks with us today from Machi. I hope I said that right. uh, Welcome, welcome. And I know we've got some Pennsylvania folks with us tonight from CHAP. I am a former CHAP homeschooling mom myself. I was a very active member of the York Homeschoolers Association way back in the day. I am a retired homeschool mom now, but those were fond memories of mine. I think we've got some families from Tennessee. Keep letting us know where you're from. Ooh, South Carolina. How exciting.
Hey, I'm from South Carolina.
Woohoo! We got a transient mover, PA to South Carolina. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're here. An Indiana representative is here. Awesome. Well, while everyone's popping in, let me introduce myself. My name is Sandy Zamalis. Like I said, was a former homeschooling mom, but now I'm an owner of Learning RX Center in Stanton and Harrisonburg, Virginia. I'm here with my colleagues tonight. We have Dargan Coggeshall. He is a Learning RX owner from Charlottesville, Virginia. And we have our colleague, Rebecca Grow, who's going to be manning the chat. So if you've got questions tonight or already preloaded that you want to know about attention, that would be a great place to start planning those so that we can ask those of Dr. Amy when she pops on tonight and goes through her presentation with you. Learning RX as a whole, we're here to represent families that have struggling learners. That is our passion. We love helping kids and adults achieve better learning and learning success. And so we have lots of different things we love to talk about, and attention is the one we're going to be talking about this evening. So Dr. Amy Moore is my colleague, and she's the host of the Brainy Moms podcast that I get to do with her. So are there any Brainy Mom podcast listeners out there by chance? Anybody ever heard of the Brainy Moms podcast? Well, if not, we hope you'll chime in. We've been around I think it's our 5th year, if not going into our 6th. And we just love it. And we love being able to share information just about all things with the brain and development with kids and with families and parenting in general. So the way things are going to go tonight, before I introduce Dr. Amy and let her go ahead and take the reins, we want to make sure that you stick around, stay for the whole show tonight, because we've got lots of free stuff at the end that we want to make sure that you get access to. And there will be some sales and things that you might want to take advantage of that are tonight only opportunities. So with that said, thank you guys for being here. We're excited that you're here. And now I'm going to, drum roll please, let Dr. Amy Moore take over.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm so excited to be here with you guys tonight. I'm going to share my screen so that I can do some slides. And like Sandy said, if you would be willing to just put your questions in the chat, and then Rebecca is going to feed those to me towards the end or at the end, so that we can make sure that we get as many questions answered as possible. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and can I get a thumbs up if you're seeing full screen? All right, thank you so much. So tonight's webinar is called Attention and Learning, Moving the Focus Beyond Focus. So I'm just gonna quickly tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a cognitive psychologist, and I'm the Director of Psychology and Research at Learning RX World Headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado, at the headquarters of the largest network of cognitive training centers in the world. Like Sandy said, I am the host of the Brady Moms podcast. I am a former teacher and curriculum specialist and teacher educator. I have a master's in early childhood and a PhD in psychology. I'm also a board certified Christian counselor. And I'm an ADHD mom and a mom with ADHD. So spend enough time with me and you will hear me brag. Not really, but you will hear me call myself an ADHD warrior. And so, what that means is I absolutely get the struggle. I understand what it feels like to have a brain that doesn't work the same as the majority of people, and I understand what it feels like to have kids who have those same struggles. I did homeschool two of my kids off and on. Our middle child went straight through regular school and did just fine that way. And the other two, we had to individualize what worked for them in each season. And so we've done a season of online schooling. We've done, where we did a set curriculum at home. We did some unschooling. At one point, we sent our youngest to college and gave him high school credit for it. So I'm a super fan of homeschooling, and so I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys tonight. All right, so what are we going to talk about? Well, first, we're going to talk about what focus and attention are, and then why focus gets so much attention. And then we'll look at cognitive skills and learning, including what happens when weak cognitive skills impact learning, and then finally what we can do about it. And hopefully we'll be able to dive into all of those questions that you guys have at the end. Okay, so after working with over 130,000 clients across our Learning RX centers, a concern that we hear all the time from parents is this: my kid can't focus. So I'm sure you can relate. That's probably why you're here tonight. And you're concerned that your child is struggling with focus and that it's impacting how they're functioning, maybe in school and in life. Well, I want to talk about the definition of focus. So, focus is the ability to direct mental effort to the most relevant information in the environment. So, for example, if you're taking a math test, focus is the ability to engage in the tasks on the math test while ignoring all of the other information in your awareness at the same time. And that includes sights and sounds, smells and feelings, and other potential distractions. The reality of focus is this: most kids can focus, but their focus might not be on the most relevant piece of information at the time. They can focus or direct their mental effort, but not always on the right thing. All right, so how often does our mind wander? Well, research shows that the average person spends anywhere from 10% to 60% of their day mind wandering. And that means that our mind wanders from the task at hand up to 60% of our day. And here's why. So, research shows that the average brain shifts 4 times per second from sharp focus on a task to a broader awareness of our surroundings and then back. And we could argue that our brains are programmed that way for survival. But it also makes us understand focus a little bit better. So we focus on the task, but we're continually scanning our environment for anything more important than the task. And unfortunately, that process can be impacted by curiosity, especially in children and people with ADHD. Hence the joke about squirrels and shiny objects hijacking our attention. But that process can also be impacted by poor working memory. If we can't hold memory of the task that we are currently working on or focused on, then it's easier to be pulled away from it. And there are a variety of other influences on that shift in focus as well. So, what does that look like? I'm focused on this test, but I hear a siren outside. I have to make sure that siren doesn't mean I'm in danger. Or as adults, when we're working from home, we have to make sure that our kids fighting in the basement doesn't mean they're hurting each other. So we focus sharply, and then we're constantly scanning our environment for signs of danger or something more important. And our brains are just designed that way. All right, so there are several reasons why this phenomenon of off-task focus occurs, or why we direct mental effort of any kind to something besides the task. All right, so number one, we're tired, hungry, sick, or stressed. Tired, hungry, sick, or stressed. That is the number one place that I go to when something looks out of the normal, right? Are you tired, hungry, sick, or stressed? And so any one of those would shift our focus from the task that we're working on. Some other reasons might be that we're bored or we're not motivated. We might be suffering from anxiety over something, or we're exhibiting some sort of defiant behavior, meaning I don't want to work on this task. Therefore, I'm going to focus on something else. And other causes of off task focus could be that the task is too hard, or that we have poor working memory, or poor processing speed, or poor reasoning skills. All right, so where is attention during learning? Well, we know that the brain is constantly shifting focus for a variety of reasons. And what does this constant shifting look like during learning? Well, Dr. Ariel Keller at Stanford created a diagram to show how attention in the classroom might be directed at any given time. And so I've adapted this model for our purposes in showing how focus constantly shifts throughout the day. And according to the model, a student's attention frequently modulates between an internal and an external focus, and between an on topic and off topic focus. The external focus of attention can be off topic or on topic, and the internal focus of attention can be off topic or on topic. So let's look at some examples. When your brain has an off-topic external focus, it might be because you heard a pencil tapping. That's off topic. It's off task. It's external to you. It's a pencil tapping. An on-topic external focus would be that you're reading a book about a topic. So it's not inside you, it's external. When your brain has an on topic but external focus, it might be because you're reading a book related to your school assignment. That's on topic or on task, and it's external to you. And then the fourth place that your brain directs mental effort is to an on topic and internal focus, such as you're accessing your long term memory. So we're learning something new. We're typically accessing our prior knowledge and then building on it. So for example, in a math lesson, I already know how to add 2 plus 4. So I'm going to use that same strategy from memory to learn how to add bigger numbers like 5 plus 6. So our focus stays on topic and is internal to us. All right, so when trying to relate the topic to prior knowledge, or when trying to hold multiple components of the topic in our memory at the same time in order to solve a problem, poor memory, slow processing speed, or a lack of reasoning skills can paralyze us as a student. And if we're struggling to stay in that lower right quadrant of using our internal resources to stay on topic, we can quickly shift our mental effort from on topic internal focus to off topic stress and frustration. And all of this is happening inside us, internally. There are no external distractions to pull our focus away. Just this awareness that a lack of processing ability is creating an emotional response that is shifting our focus. It's been argued over the last 50 years of neuroscience research that stress takes the prefrontal cortex offline and inhibits reasoning and learning. So when something is too hard, our child may begin to feel some frustration. And if he can't push through the frustration because he doesn't have the skills for the task, then we see one of three things happen. A, he chooses to do something else or think about something else. B, he has a stress-induced fight or flight reaction, meltdown. Or 3, he freezes and can't do anything. And so given this information about this natural propensity for the brain to shift focus and some influences on this focus as mental effort of any kind, let's look now at formal attention. and examine its role in learning, and then we're going to put it all together. So there are four primary types of attention, and the situation or the task is going to determine the type of attention that's required for that task. So let's look at each type and how they show up in learning. And by the way, this diagram is just colorful and decorative because I love colorful and decorative things. It doesn't actually indicate specific parts of the brain associated with these skills. All right, so the first type of formal attention is called sustained attention, and that's the ability to focus on one task without getting distracted. And sustained attention includes things like the ability to focus for an extended period of time, being able to focus during reading or during teaching or a lecture, the ability to follow multi-step instructions. It's the skill of not interrupting others. And it also shows up in the ability to organize schoolwork and our belongings and in our ability to meet deadlines. All right, the next type of formal attention is called selective attention, and that's the ability to focus on one thing while ignoring others. And so selective attention can be our ability to focus on the relevant information and our ability to focus on important instructions, being able to follow along with a lesson or a lecture, tuning out external sounds while reading a book, focusing on the road and not on the music or the conversation while driving, or being able to focus on someone talking in a noisy place. Okay, the third type of formal attention is called alternating attention, and that's the ability to be able to switch rapidly between two tasks. So we know that neurologically, there's no such thing as multitasking. So I know that behaviorally, we think we can multitask, but neurologically, that isn't what's happening. Instead, our brain is just rapidly switching between the tasks based on our alternating attention ability. So if you're able to rapidly switch tasks, it means you have pretty strong alternating attention. Okay, so with strong alternating attention, we're able to prioritize tasks in real time. And those of you who have ADHD or have kids with ADHD have probably noticed that prioritizing can be a real struggle. And that's because the ADHD brain thinks everything is important. So it also means that we can switch between unrelated tasks like reading and then answering questions about that reading, and then being able to read and then listen to instructions and then return to reading. It can also help students in group discussions easily shift between speaking, listening to others speak, and then responding to others. And it helps students easily resume a task or a thought after being interrupted. And it also enables students to switch between school subjects. For example, to be able to work on math homework, stop to write an essay, and then return to finish that math homework without forgetting their place or how to do the tasks, without having to relearn, okay, how was I supposed to do that again? And then that fourth type of formal attention is called divided attention, or the ability to focus on multiple tasks at the same time. So again, not multitasking, but being able to attend to multiple sources of information at the same time. And so what does that look like? So an example could be being able to read and take notes at the same time, listening to a lecture and taking notes at the same time, being able to do your schoolwork while listening to music, writing a story while simultaneously thinking about character development and where the plot might be going, listening to instructions while typing and texting, or listening to an audiobook while drawing or completing some sort of creative project. So the type of task determines how divided attention can impact learning. And so more difficult tasks, tasks that are new and tasks with competing importance, make it harder to divide our attention between them. However, tasks that seem less important might not command enough attention, and this can lead to errors when we divide our attention between those and more important tasks. And then tasks that are similar to one another make it easier to divide our attention unless they are using competing resources. So it's really hard to write a letter and take notes at the same time, even though those tasks seem similar. Okay, so to recap, here are the four primary types of attention: sustained attention, selective attention, alternating attention, and divided attention. And so remember, we're differentiating between focus is mental effort, and formal attention, which is task dependent. And so let's put these two diagrams together and see what that looks like. All right, so remember, the brain shifts between being on topic and off topic, influenced by both internal and external information or factors. And so those four formal types of attention are internal factors or skills that can help keep our brain on topic. So the formal attention types are just one small piece of the mental effort or focus puzzle, and they belong in that lower right quadrant. So these are behaviors and phenomenon that parents frequently say they're seeing when they tell us that their child can't focus. So they can't remember instructions, they're easily distracted by noise or movement in their environment. They can't engage in studying for long periods of time, or they can't read for long periods of time. They miss important details. They can't solve problems without getting upset. They misunderstand the steps or the instructions. They can't follow multi-stepped directions, right? How many of you will say, I need you to go upstairs, brush your teeth, put your pajamas on, and put your clothes in the laundry basket? How many of you give that instruction, but we get lost between brushing our teeth and making it to our bedroom to put our pajamas on? So not being able to follow multi-step instructions looks like poor focus, but we're going to talk about that in just a second. So other examples might be that your child has poor reading comprehension. They start, but they don't finish tasks, and they lose things. But just because it walks like a duck, focus, doesn't mean it's a duck. We have this tendency to throw all of these things into the idea that our child just can't focus, but that might not actually be what's happening. So, why do we put so much attention on attention? Why does everything seem like a focus problem? Well, one reason might be that there are a lot of misconceptions about ADHD and learning. And I'm going to show you a graph in a few minutes that illustrates how ADHD is not just about focus and attention. And so we toss struggles with mental effort into this ADHD bucket when maybe there's another explanation. And then as Americans, we tend to pathologize the low ends of normal. And we tend to want a diagnosis to explain something that might just be slower development or slower processing that falls within normal limits sometimes. And another reason may be that we have too broad of a view of focus and learning. We tend to blame all of the learning problems on an inability to focus. And as we've just talked about, focus is a fuzzy term that's easy to fall back on and easy to use. But we know that learning and struggles with learning deserve a lens with a little bit more clarity. And finally, there's not enough attention being paid to the other cognitive skills as a potential culprit for learning challenges. And there's this lack of awareness about the role of memory and processing speed and reasoning, for example, in learning struggles. And so that's why I say, in response to concerns about focus, that it's so much more than focus. What looks like a focus problem might be a processing speed or working memory problem. And so we need to get specific about the struggle so we can target the struggle. We need to move the focus beyond focus and attention when it comes to learning struggles. So what am I talking about? What are these cognitive skills? Well, that's the work that we do. And so let's take a big picture look at what cognitive skills are. So there are two parts to SMART. There's information storage That's knowledge and accumulated facts. Those are our school subjects. That's our database of information, and we measure it with things like grades and achievement tests. But then there's information processing, or how efficiently we take in and use information. And so those are skills like attention and reasoning and visualization and memory and auditory or language processing. So I want to demonstrate. If you all have been in a workshop with me before, you may have seen this demonstration, but let's just all do it together. In just a second, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to complete a task with your mind. So don't use any paper. You can leave your mics off, but you can say it out loud because it just makes it more fun and none of us can hear you. So ready? You have 10 seconds to spell the last name of the first United States president backwards. Spell the last name of the first United States president backwards. Ready? Go. And stop. Okay, how'd you do? This would be what the word Washington looks like backwards. And I want to walk you through what your brain did during that task. So this is called the learning model, and it represents information processing and storage. So here are the cognitive skills that you used to complete that task. So first you had to remember the name of the first United States president, George Washington. Okay, so that's long-term memory. Next, you had to plan a strategy for how you were going to complete that task. That's reasoning or logic. Then most of you probably projected the word Washington in your mind or in the air, right? Well, that's visual processing. You had to manipulate the sounds and the letters that make up the word Washington and put them in the correct order. That's auditory or language processing. Your brain was keeping track of which letters you had already used and which ones were coming up next, and that's working memory. About halfway through this task, some of you may have gotten frustrated or maybe even a little bored, so you had to really engage your attention skills. And finally, I only gave you 10 seconds to complete that task, so you had to work fast. That's processing speed. So that seemingly simple task, you engaged at least 7 different cognitive skills all at the same time. And that just illustrates that thinking and learning and cognition is complex. So imagine if you had a weakness in one of those cognitive skills. Like if you had a weakness in long-term memory, you could not have even done that task because you wouldn't be able to remember who Washington was. But if you had a weakness in auditory processing, you might not have been able to manipulate those letters and sounds in the correct order. Or if you had weak working memory, you might not have remembered which letter you had already said or which one was coming up. So if you had a weakness in 2 or 3 of those skills, that task may have been impossible. So what do we do about that? Well, here are some key cognitive skills needed for traditional school tasks. So notice that learning to read and reading comprehension and writing and math ability all require the skills of reasoning, visual and auditory processing, long-term memory, working memory, processing speed, and attention. So these cognitive skills are the underlying learning skills that we use all day, every day in school, but then we use them all day, every day in thinking as well. Okay, so now that we've covered what cognitive skills are, let me show you what we see in terms of weaker cognitive skills in students with attention struggles. So in 2019, neuroscientist Dr. Christina Ledbetter and I created cognitive profiles of more than 5,000 children and adults with ADHD, so people ages 4 through 40, using standardized IQ tests. And so what we did is we plotted the performance on each of the individual subtests across age groups. And what we found was really surprising. Attention was not the weakest skill in ADHD. In fact, working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed were weaker skills than attention. Well, the prevailing wisdom in ADHD interventions is that attention needs to be strengthened. But the reality is we don't have a deficit of attention in ADHD. It's named wrong. We have too much attention. We pay attention to everything. And remember, I said that the ADHD brain can't rack and stack priorities. Everything seems important. So, in reality, what's happening is working memory, long term memory, and processing speed are creating the struggle that we see and we call a problem with focus. So, an intervention that only targets attention is going to miss the boat on the skills that are truly weaker in ADHD. Well, fascinatingly, well, here's another way to look at that. In 2023, Dr. Ledbetter and I looked at the same cognitive skills in more than 8,000. So the last was 5,000. This was more than 8,000 kids and adults who came into one of our Learning RX centers with a diagnosis of ADHD. And again, we found the same three cognitive skills were weaker than attention. In fact, working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed all fell below that 38th percentile threshold, that threshold that we use for categorizing a skill as deficient. Attention was just shy of average. And so this is, again, super important to recognize for planning interventions. All right, so then we did a very similar study with dyslexia and reading disabilities. So let me show you what that graph looks like. So the prevailing wisdom behind most reading interventions is that auditory processing skills need to be strengthened, and frequently they do, especially skills like phonological awareness and decoding. But we can't stop there. So this slide is from a study we did on more than 4,000 children with reading struggles. And again, anything below that 38th percentile shows a weakness. And what did we find? Working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed were the weakest skills in these more than 4,000 kids with reading disabilities. And so we have to include remediation of those other underlying cognitive skills in order to most successfully impact reading fluency and comprehension. And so this is another way to look at that information, right? You can see very easily in a bar graph how those skills fell actually below the 30th percentile in this group. Okay, so smart kids and adults can still struggle because we all have at least one weak cognitive skill. And that doesn't mean that we aren't smart. It just means that we could use some help processing information more efficiently to help us think and learn more easily, to help us stay on task. All right, so we're going back to this graph of how our brain is shifting between on-topic and off-topic tasks with internal and external influences. And we land on an internal struggle to keep us on topic and focus mental effort when we have weak working memory or long-term memory, processing speed, reasoning, visual and auditory processing. And of course, the 4 types of attention fall into that quadrant as well. And we do need to help build those attention skills, but we really need to address the whole of cognition. So when a parent comes to us or comes to me and is concerned and says, my kid can't focus, what that parent probably means is something like this instead. My kid is struggling with something so much that he can't do it in a reasonable amount of time or at all. So instead of sticking with it, he finds something else to do or think about doing. His brain is shifting off task because of that struggle. And so we have this tendency to use the word focus when we mean stick-to-itness or perseverance on a task. The reality is, if a task is too hard or too demanding, we aren't going to stick with it. That doesn't mean we can't focus at all. It means we won't focus very long on it. So remember this part of the graph, that lower left quadrant, where our attention turns to our internal stress and frustration when learning is too hard. And that's probably because one or more of those cognitive skills need to be strengthened. Well, let's just talk about working memory and processing speed for just a second. So we saw that working memory and processing speed was weak in our studies on ADHD and dyslexia. Well, weak working memory actually contributes to emotion dysregulation too. And we know that about 80% of kids with ADHD have severe emotion dysregulation issues. So it's not just a little frustration that might take our child's focus off the task. It could be a full building up meltdown. And here's why. So, working memory impairments can allow an emotion to take over because we can't keep other relevant information in mind at the same time. So, impaired working memory can make it difficult to effectively use cognitive strategies for emotional regulation. We have to be able to hold alternatives and reason through explanation and options and make a plan and execute it in mind. Strong working memory allows us to do all of that, and strong processing speed allows us to do it quickly enough before we have a meltdown. And so that's the contribution of these cognitive skills to emotion dysregulation. So let me just give you an example. Let's say that you tell your child it's time to stop playing a game so she can work on her math assignment. How many of you witness an instantaneous meltdown? Or how many of you get ignored, ask 3 more times, and then witness a meltdown? Well, the ADHD brain is going to focus on the crisis. I no longer get to do what I'm doing. My mom is terrible, horrible, and awful. She's screaming at me, so she must hate me. She doesn't love me because she won't let me do what I want. My life is over and I'm dying. When we have weak executive functioning, which includes working memory, we can't delay our response until all the facts have been weighed. One, because we can't keep all the facts in mind long enough to weigh them, and we can't remember the facts quickly enough to bring them into our awareness in order to act on them. So we focus only on the crisis, and it triggers this emotional hijack, which now takes our prefrontal cortex offline, and now we're melting into a puddle of tears on the floor. Can you relate? So, what do we do about it? How do we actually help improve these cognitive skills that keep shifting this focus? Well, cognitive skills can't be taught like US history. They actually have to be trained. There's a difference between teaching and training. So you can teach a child a fact by telling it to them or having them read about it. For example, you can teach them that George Washington was the first president. And so now they know that George Washington was the first president. It's fairly easy to teach facts. But things like skills have to be trained. So you can tell your child the rules of a tennis game, but until they hold a racket and hit the ball over a net over and over again, they won't actually develop a strong skill of being able to play tennis just by learning the rules of the game. So cognitive skills are the same way. We don't develop strong cognitive skills without using them and practicing them. So they need to be trained. Well, how do we do that? Well, every child can benefit from games. Games engage cognitive skills. And in fact, one of the free things we're going to give you today is a spreadsheet that tells you all the cognitive skills that each of these individual games help to engage. But struggling learners may need formal intervention. Games do a great job at engaging cognitive skills. But if a child is truly struggling, if they truly have a weakness or a deficit in one of those skills, like I showed you in the graphs of our studies on ADHD and reading disability, then they probably need a formal intervention. So it's like the difference between eating a balanced diet to stay healthy, but needing a special diet if you have food allergies. So we focus at Learning RX all over the world in cognitive skills training or brain training. And so what actually is that? Well, brain training is deliberate engagement in targeted, repeated, intense mental tasks based on this concept of neuroplasticity. And that's the brain's amazing ability to change with experience. We know from research that the number one predictor of therapeutic success is the relationship with the person delivering the intervention. And so we deliver all of our programs one-on-one by a human cognitive trainer who individualizes the intervention to meet the specific needs of each client. They give dynamic feedback with encouragement and high fives as students master each training task. And we have over 1,000 different hands-on training tasks. We have each one has about 10 to 12 variations in difficulty and complexity. And so that gives our trainers a ton of different ways to individualize the programs and train those cognitive skills. And almost every single training procedure is paced with a metronome or timed to increase intensity and prevent mental breaks. And we like to call that affectionately creating a mental sweat. And so we focus on cognitive training, but we're also experts in reading. So we have reading and math remediation interventions on top of the cognitive training when needed. And so LearningRx actually has the only structured literacy program based on the science of reading, along with training in working memory, long-term memory, attention processing speed, visual and auditory processing, and reasoning. So if your child is also struggling with reading, this is important to know. We believe that strong cognitive skills are the foundation needed to support the development of all of those reading skills. You can see at the bottom of this pyramid that cognitive skills are the foundation. So most reading programs, even structured literacy programs, even programs that align with the science of reading, they don't address the cognitive skills, and cognitive skills matter for reading. So since the 1990s, we've had dozens of studies conducted on our programs, 17 of which have been published in medical and psychology journals. Since 2015, I've been the lead researcher on most of those. And we love sharing our research because it's one of the things that differentiates us from other programs. And because the results give us a message of hope. Our research has shown significant improvements in all of those individual cognitive skills that we've been talking about. But the holy grail of cognitive training is to find changes that impact real life. And so the number one change that we see all day, every day in our centers and in our research is improved confidence and self-esteem, particularly for learning. But look at all these other amazing real life improvements that we have found as researchers. And then we love pictures. We actually have used MRI scans to document changes in the brain before and after our training. And so we've seen changes in brain network connections, change in brain structure, overall cognitive efficiency improvement, and changes in the brain that correlate to our test scores. So super fun. You can dig into our research if you so desire on our website, and you can see some more fMRI pictures like that. And so we really have expertise that you can trust at LearningRx. We have actually been training neurodivergent brains for more than 30 years. That includes over 130,000 kids and adults. Like I said, we're in 45 countries. We do this all over the world. I'm on the corporate staff, and so we provide the oversight. So we have 2 psychologists, a neuroscientist, an audiologist, and education specialists that provide global oversight over our programs. And then we have peer-reviewed research, which is super important to support what we do. So if you want more from me, Sandy mentioned our podcast, The Brainy Moms. And so you can go to thebrainymoms.com and listen to all those cool episodes, and more information on cognitive training at learningrx.com. And I'm going to give you a QR code on the next slide for some free stuff. And so you'll scan the QR code. You'll give me your name and email address, and I think zip code. And then I will email you a bunch of cool stuff. And then, so here's that. I'll go ahead and let you scan that code. And then if you want to get a profile of your child's cognitive skills, check the chat. So Rebecca is going to put a link in the chat box, and we have a deal for you live. So if you are attending this webinar live, and you sign up in the next 24 hours, we're going to give you a cognitive skills assessment and a consultation with one of our center owners for only $55 or $59. Rebecca will put that in the chat. $55 tonight for our homeschool families. When we go to conferences, we usually offer this for $99. So this is actually a really good deal. But normally this is $250 to $299 in our centers. So if you're done with that, go ahead and check the chat for that link. And again, that's just for our live attendees. If you are watching this playback, you can still get your child tested at a LearningRx center. You just can't take advantage of this live offer. All right, so I am going to stop the slideshow so that I can see your faces and start to answer your questions. All right.
So one question that popped up was, can you talk a little bit about how these attention struggles, a lot of these sound like they might be related to auditory processing. So can you talk a little bit more about that connection between those two skills?
So there's a difference between auditory processing and hearing. And so when we talk about auditory processing, we're talking about the ability to manipulate sounds in the English language. So that ability to say, I understand that when I blend these two sounds, it makes this new sound. When we can drop a part of a word, this is the new word that we have. Or when we blend sounds, segment sounds, that we recognize that there are special ways of spelling the same sounds. So, in terms of, I'm not actually sure I understand the question. So, how are attention and auditory processing related? So, if we're looking at shifting focus, if a child or an adult, if a child is struggling with that ability to manipulate sounds, then that is when that frustration begins to arise, right? And you begin to experience some anxiety. I'm not able to do this. And so then your attention is going to shift. That your focus is going to shift to either the stress and frustration that you're feeling or to something easier or something that you can do. And if I didn't answer that question completely, feel free to give me some additional information about the question so that maybe I can do a better job.
Yeah, here's a little bit of a follow-up. So a question is, what parts of auditory processing do we address? Phonemics, yes, and reading-based sounds, but what about pitch, speech and noise, or spatial sound processing?
Yeah, so Sandy, do you want to take that question?
I wish Dr. Jody was here.
I
Dr.
know,
Jody.
right? Dr. Jody's our audiologist, but Sandy is in the trenches delivering the reading intervention all day, every day, and so.
Yeah, so we definitely manage the phonics and phonemic awareness side of things. And then we also work on pitch. We have a pitch portion of our digital program that we use that helps to kind of target that as well. Speech and noise. So we work in a crowded environment in all of our training centers so that we're actually practicing those selective attention skills and using those auditory processing skills in real time. We load with auditory processing skills as well. So we're working on those divided attention and alternating attention tasks to help in that regard. Spatial sound processing is probably out of my league to answer on that sound, but if anybody else wants to chime in, Dr. Jody would be the better one to answer that question, and she's not here.
Yeah, so we actually are not determining which side of the body the sound is coming from. We're not assessing whether or not you're not able to process as well, if the sound is coming from behind you or on your right side versus your left side. We're focused on how does auditory processing and how do auditory processing skills impact learning, impact reading ability, the development of all of the individual reading skills, and what we can do about it.
Awesome. So
Dr. Amy,
Uh-huh.
go ahead. So one of the things that I hear kind of on the front line and visiting all of the conventions and interacting with all of our homeschool families is that how do you know when a development when it's age appropriate and when there's a problem? Because there's kind of an inertia of, oh, we'll just give it time and next year he'll pick up be able to focus and pick up reading. Like when do you know,
Yeah.
Houston, we have a problem?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pull my slides back up. I want to go back. Give me just a second to find it. I'm going to go back to, um, All right, so this would be, can you guys see full screen? No, yes,
No.
no, okay.
That we see your,
Now can you see full screen?
yes.
Okay, so what I want you to notice is this graph on the left starts with ages 5 through 7 and ends with ages 18 at the end. And what you'll see in the absence of an intervention, those skills continue to decline. Look at auditory processing right in the middle, the big red line. So we're talking about auditory processing is the foundation for reading skill development. In the absence of an intervention, that skill continues to get worse and more deficient. And so what that says to us is we don't want to wait. The longer we wait, the higher the risk that that skill is going to continue to get worse. Does that answer your question, Dargan?
Yes.
Let's hop to the next one. So on a practical level, how can you talk about these things with your child and encourage them in their weak areas without making them feel like something is wrong with them or comparing them to others?
Yeah, I love that question. And I'm going to start by saying there's a trend on social media to call your neurodivergent diagnosis a superpower. And I think that that trend is really dangerous because I think what happens is then we are not validating the struggle. So I think what's important is to find what Dr. Robert Brooks calls islands of competence. And so he said that kids with learning struggles swim in an ocean of inadequacy. And so that's really frustrating and disappointing. It can have low self-esteem, low motivation. And so what we want to do as parents is to find those islands of competence in the middle of this ocean. And those are the things that our child does excel at, that our child does well, and that builds resilience to the struggle. So what it's saying is, hey, I recognize and you can see that you can be successful in all of these other things despite having a struggle over here in these things. And so I think when we're honest with our kids, what that says is, I see you. When we speak honestly with our kids about their struggles, it says, I see your struggle. And if we try to pretend that there isn't a problem, then a child feels unseen. So I think honesty is the best way to do it in a way that says, hey, I've noticed that you're really struggling with these math problems. Let's see if we can find another way to figure that out. And if not, I want to see if maybe we need to do some testing or get some additional help that I, as a parent, have not been able to do yet.
All right, next question. So we have somebody who's going to be homeschooling for the first time this fall, going into 7th grade, but there are gaping holes in her academic foundation. And so this mom is curious about how to integrate this type of training into a homeschool day. How often, how does that merge with homeschooling?
Yeah. Well, here's the exciting part. We can come into your dining room. We can deliver this program over Zoom so that you don't have to leave your house and perhaps your other kids that you might be homeschooling at the same time. You can do a combination where we like to do training 3 to 4 days a week. So 3 90-minute sessions or 4 1-hour sessions. But if that's too much to get in the car and come to the center, you could come to the center once a week, and then we can come to you through Zoom the other 2 or 3 sessions a week. We published a study right after COVID where we compared the outcomes for in-person training to the outcomes over Zoom, and there were no statistically significant differences. in the outcomes. So that's the good news. If you don't live near a center, or you've got all this happening in your homeschool classroom, and we can come to you. Do you want me to talk about the medication question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The question is, do you advocate for or against medicating children who are diagnosed with ADHD? I love that question. So I actually do an ADHD presentation on 5 things that may be influencing your child's symptoms. And so I talk about sleep and nutrition and physical exercise, cognition and stress management. And so what I like to suggest is that we try all of those other things first. So optimizing sleep, looking at cognitive skills, are there areas where those need to be plussed up or strengthened? What does the nutrition look like? Are we limiting sugar, gluten, artificial food dyes, and pesticide exposure? Are we teaching our child emotion regulation techniques? How to manage their emotions through breathing and grounding and mindfulness exercises? Are we getting at least 20 minutes of green time every day? I would advocate for 2 hours a day of physical activity, because physical activity, particularly aerobic activity, increases what is known as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that's like miracle growth for the brain. And then, are your child's omega-3 fatty acid levels optimized? Because we know that dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that's implicated in ADHD, and low omega-3 fatty acid levels are associated with misshapen dopamine receptors. And when we can normalize the omega-3 fatty acid levels, then we normalize the dopamine receptor shape and they can catch the dopamine. And so I always recommend that we try all of these other things, but there are some kids and adults that might still need medication as well. And that's okay. And so sometimes I use this analogy and people cringe, other times it falls well. So take it for what it is. You can kill a fly on a wall with a fly swatter, or you can kill it with a wrecking ball. Both do the job. And so medication has side effects. And so we want to limit exposure to side effects. But if all of these other things haven't contributed to improvements, we don't want our child to suffer. We don't want our child to continue to struggle. And so absolutely at that point, I would support asking your doctor about medication. I'm a PhD psychologist, not an MD medical doctor, so I can't give advice about medication, but that is my opinion.
Do you want to dive a little bit deeper into the sleep question? Because that was brought up specifically. How do you get an ADHD child to sleep?
Yeah. So one of the things that we get to do as parents is put on our investigator cap and figure out, is my child a sensory seeker or a sensory avoider? And I'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. But once we decide, or once we figure out if our kid is a sensory seeker or a sensory avoider, then we can create their bedroom to match their sensory needs. And so the sensory processing issues that most ADHD children have don't get enough attention. So if your child is the kind that is running in circles in the living room and throws themselves into the couch cushion, they are a sensory seeker. That means they are seeking sensory experience. They are seeking sensory input from the environment. And I use that one as an example because it's super common. Sensory avoiders are those who can't stand the tag in their shirt, who are overstimulated easily by noise, by light, by sounds, by textures, even textures in food. And so you can go on the internet and Google, sensory seeking, sensory avoiding checklists that can give you some ideas of what to look for. And for kids that are over 7, you could really have a conversation with them about it too. Do they like to be rolled up in a burrito in a blanket? Right? Do they respond well to a weighted blanket or a weighted lap pad? Right? So once you determine whether your child is a sensory seeker or a sensory avoider, then you create a bedroom that matches that. And that will exponentially improve their ability to go to sleep and stay asleep. So if you've got a sensory avoider, then you want a room that is not overstimulating. If you've got a sensory seeker, then they might need a swing in their room. And as you're reading their book with them at bedtime, they may need to be swinging. Things like that.
Dr. Amy, I have another question, or just again an issue I deal with in the field, that many of the traditionally schooled families or the homeschool families who pulled their children from traditional schools, who may have IEPs and 504s, which tend to be more accommodative in their approach to the learning struggle, right? Giving extra time, letting them move to the front of the class, giving them unlimited time on
Sure.
and then the homeschool families find themselves, many of them, doing the same things when they are then in control. Can you describe or explain the difference of kind of an accommodative approach versus a skill building approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me just say that accommodations are kind. They really are the school system's way of saying, yes, we recognize that your child has a diagnosed struggle and we're willing to help. And so I think it's kind. But what happens is your child needs those same helps, those same accommodations um, for the rest of schooling, and then it switches from one law to a different law once they get to college, right? So then we sometimes have to go through an entire diagnostic process all over again to get enough data for the uh, college disability office to approve those same accommodations. And then they get out into adult life and the workforce, and they have to hope that they can find a job that accommodates in the same way or in a similar way. And so, again, accommodations are kind, but they don't fix the problem. They don't get to the root cause of the struggle. And so, a skill building approach addresses the root cause. And so, instead of accommodating ADHD with preferential seating, if we train attention skills, then that child can sit anywhere they want, because then they're able to focus on or pay attention to the most relevant piece of information happening in the class. And so you are absolutely right, Wendy. Colleges also shame the student by making them go to each professor and explain how they are broken. So you will get a letter from the disability office that you have to give to each professor. And then you have to ask the professor to use your accommodation each time you need to use it. So it isn't a, here's my letter, all of my assignments are going to be 2 weeks late because I have ADHD. It doesn't work that way. You have to email or call or talk to your professor and say, I want to use my accommodations for this assignment. And so it is really hard. And you're right, they do have to negotiate those. I so that creates anxiety. And what happens with anxiety is it takes the prefrontal cortex offline, and then you can't learn. And so it's a vicious cycle. Back to the sleep question, anxiety also comes into play as well, right? So when you have a child who is living in a state of chronic stress, first of all, the brain doesn't know the difference between trauma and chronic stress. It responds the same way. So those same fight or flight hormones are coursing through our veins when we're in chronic stress and when we are in fight or flight. And a child who is struggling to learn lives in a state of chronic stress. And so that makes it very difficult to get a good night's sleep. When you are experiencing chronic stress and the anxiety that comes from, hey, I'm struggling and I don't know what to do about it, and mom might not know what to do about it. And so getting to the root cause of the struggle can also help with the anxiety that a child could be feeling as well in both scenarios.
Right. If anybody has more questions to put in the chat, go ahead and put them in. We've got one more that I'm seeing. Have we seen any?
I'm gonna answer Wendy's comment about the schools pushing medication at an early age.
Sure.
So fascinating thing about medication. So I was a teacher before I was a psychologist. So I feel like it's okay for me to comment on this. It is very hard to manage a classroom of 30 students when you have several who have behavior problems. And so to ask a parent to put their child on medication is so that the teacher has a better chance of managing the classroom when she's got 30 kids, that she's wrangling or he's wrangling. And so typically that push for medication is a behavioral issue, not necessarily because a teacher says, hey, I think your child has working memory problems. Let's put them on medication. Because the reality is that medication is not the answer for weak reasoning skills or auditory processing skills or visual processing skills, right? So it can help a little bit with processing speed, it can help a little bit with focus. But as we demonstrated in that Washington activity, there's a lot more complexity in cognition than just attention.
Amy, would a good measurement be that, if using medication, the learning process is easier, then obviously the medication is being helped in that scenario. But if we're still seeing the same learning struggles, even with the medication, that's a
Right.
little bit of a red flag that there's some weaker cognitive pieces at play.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Was that a comment?
Well, yes,
Yes.
but just
Yes.
wanted to make sure I was thinking the right way.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, so it can be beneficial for, some of the struggle, but won't necessarily address. And you don't necessarily know until you have an assessment, which of those skills might be contributing to the struggle. And so, but if your child is on medication and there's still a struggle, then it's worth exploring the root cause.
So, Dr. Amy, I'm just wondering, so there's evidence saying that if you avoid medication or pharmaceutical treatment of a child with ADHD in earlier ages, then there's continuing damaging of the dopamine receptors, and they get basically clogged up to where then they don't accept the dopamine, and it causes further damage and cognitive delays and difficulties with social interactions and mood stability down the road.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of interesting research coming out right now on if we wait, then we don't get the benefits. If we start early, then we do get the benefits. The problem is central nervous system stimulants impact the dopamine reward pathway and strengthen addictive behavior patterns, which that's super scary. Like that's super scary so I think we're in a season where a lot of research is being conducted because we have people who are very pro meds who want to show if you don't do this early enough, this is what's going to happen. But we also have people that are saying, wait a minute, hold on. There are long-term risks to it as well. And we know that ADHD is associated with more addiction. And so now the question is it ADHD that's associated with the addiction, or is it treatment of ADHD that's now associated with the addiction? And that's an interesting question. And we don't have the answer yet. This research is just coming out. But when I read it, it's only been 2 or 3 weeks. I was standing in the kitchen with my clinical neuroscientist best friend, and we both have ADHD and our mouths were gaping open. So I think everything that we can do to influence how our dopamine works naturally, we should. And so omega-3 fatty acids are going to be the #1 choice there. And we don't know. So we don't know, are we not producing enough dopamine and norepinephrine? Are we producing enough, but the receptors can't catch it, right? It gets lost in the synaptic cleft. Or are we producing enough, and before the receiving neuron can catch it, is the sending neuron sucking it back up? Like, we don't even know that mechanism yet, right? Those are the 3 proposed reasons why dopamine and norepinephrine are not functioning properly in ADHD. But to get inside a living brain and figure that out is a little hard and arguably maybe unethical. That was a joke, but not really.
Can you talk a little bit about the cognitive skills and how those can be sometimes a root cause of chronic stress?
Yeah, so if we have a cognitive skill weakness, then that makes learning hard. And when learning is hard, we become frustrated, and that frustration turns into a cycle of chronic stress. There's a failure loop as well, right? Like, I can't do this, I'm frustrated. And when I'm frustrated, mom's yelling at me. And when mom's yelling at me, I'm more frustrated. And so just the inability to succeed at something can cause stress, but the repeated inability, the repeated struggle puts us in a stress cycle, chronic stress cycle.
Can you talk about the best form of omega-3s? There are a couple questions there.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable making a recommendation on brands. So I will just tell you personally that we use Zymogen in our household, and that's personally what we do. My husband's a nurse, and so he makes the choices on what, based on whatever. But that I would ask your pediatrician for a recommendation, because ethically I can't.
So, Amy, one of the most common questions I get is, okay, say you decide to remediate and train the skill. Does it last? Like, what else does it last? Where do we go from? Yeah.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting with kids. Like, once we've remediated a cognitive skill, they're using it all day, every day, and learning and thinking. And so we know that neurons that fire together wire together, right? We're just going to continue to strengthen those neural pathways when we're using them. And so, we did a study on several thousand of our clients where we tested them an average of 15 months after they graduated from our programs. And the retention rate was 98 to 99%. So that's pretty good. But when we're using those skills, they just get stronger.
You're sharpening your own skills.
Absolutely.
You're taking on more challenging work.
For sure. A usual time. So it depends on if your child needs a reading or math program. So, 60 to 90 hours is the typical ThinkRx. That's our cognitive training program. But 120 to 180 hours if they need both reading and math. So if you get your child tested, then that center owner will make a recommendation based on those test results and based on what you report seeing as a struggle as well. So it's not just the test, it's you saying, here's what I'm seeing, here's what their struggle is. And then they can correlate what they're seeing on the assessment with what you're saying the struggle is, what the child is saying their struggle is, in order to recommend a program. But, the minimum would be 12 weeks. And that's if they don't need reading or math. A typical program lasts about 24 weeks. Costs vary a little bit by center and area of the country, obviously, but it's similar to occupational therapy, speech and language, therapy, physical therapy, anywhere from 80 to 110 an hour, depending on where in the country you are. So Wendy's asking, my youngest has vision therapy because of visual processing disorder. Should we wait until that ends? Interestingly, Dr. Ken Gibson, who created LearningRx, he created the methodology in the 1980s because he was a pediatric eye doctor. And so he was a behavioral optometrist who specialized in vision therapy. And what he recognized was that while vision therapy did improve visual processing skills, it was not improving all of the other skills. And so that's when he then created a program that vision therapists began using in their practices long before LearningRx centers were launched. If you have your child assessed and he or she has other weak cognitive skills, I would not wait. You can do them concurrently. My guess would be that your child's going to end up with amazing visual processing skills by doing both, but certainly not necessary to wait. There wouldn't be anything that contradicted what your child is doing in vision therapy. Yes, we absolutely help college students. We work with people through age 100. We have published research on older adults, mild cognitive impairment, and early Alzheimer's. So we go through the lifespan.
And TBI too, don't forget.
Traumatic brain injury, yep. Repetitive concussions. Did I get them all?
I think we had them all. I think we're good.
All right. All right.
I'm sorry, you missed my question. Is it covered by insurance?
It is not. No, most insurances don't cover interventions for learning disabilities. Some insurance companies are covering, some programs for autism or some programs for, TBI or post-stroke recovery. But our centers are cash pay. But they do partner with the tuition companies to help.
Many of my families, if you have 8 health savings accounts or flexible spending accounts, they're able to use those funds through, so you're at least paying in pre-tax dollars, which is really nice. And if you have 529 funds set up for your children, there are more liberal interpretations of you can spend those funds now on pre-K. And so a lot of my families are using those because the intervention is pretty necessary for post-secondary, education. And so we get really creative and figure out ways. We don't ever want affordability to be a reason people don't access what we have.
Yeah. Dr. Stout asked, what about a related diagnosis like APD for auditory training? So interestingly, Our director of support, Dr. Jody Jedlicka, is a clinical audiologist, and she opened a Learning RX center when she was still practicing her clinical audiology practice because she needed a better intervention for her patients. Like she said, I found this, I stumbled upon this, and I couldn't believe it. Especially because there is such a strong auditory processing component to all of our programs. And so she actually has owned 2 centers and now works at the corporate level with us because it was such a life-changing intervention for her practice.
And she's been on the Brainy Moms podcast twice, and we've interviewed her. So if
On
anybody
auditory processing,
on
yeah.
auditory processing, so if you want to hear more just about that particular topic from her, we have that available too.
We do not require a diagnosis. In fact, you don't need a diagnosis. I love that question because a lot of times we have parents call us and they are on a waiting list for diagnostic assessment. And they ask if they have to wait, and absolutely not. They don't have to wait. So we do comprehensive testing to find out where those cognitive skills, strengths, and weaknesses are. Then again, the interview with the parents. And so we can create a program regardless of what the diagnosis is. So we don't need it. It doesn't matter what it is. And even without testing, our trainers could spend an hour with your child and know what their cognitive strengths and weaknesses are just by doing training tasks with them. So we're able to create programs in the absence of a diagnosis, with a diagnosis. That's the beauty of it. It absolutely doesn't matter. It's all about, what's your cognitive profile look like, and let us help create a program that matches. Oh my gosh, that was so fast, Rebecca.
Dr. Amy, we've had a couple questions about stuttering. I don't know if you want to try to
Yeah,
talk about that.
we've had some speech and language pathologists who have owned centers and worked in centers, but we don't have a program that targets stuttering. So I certainly wouldn't want to make I wouldn't want to say, yes, we target stuttering, because we don't. Might it help? It might help anything, but I certainly don't make any claims to that. And I don't have any research on it, and I don't have any anecdotal evidence from centers. Oh, yep. Remotely.
Can you give us a teaser on your book that's going to be published soon? If you don't feel like, that's fine as well.
No, absolutely. In fact, when you scan that QR code, I will send an update when it's out. But it's called Parenting with Grace in Mind. And it's based on the idea that when the emotion regulation starts with us, that our children can't regulate their own emotions without us helping. We have to co-regulate, and we can't access grace when we're emotionally dysregulated. Thank you, Lana. And so Grace in Mind is my actual approach. And then, so Parenting with Grace in Mind, and then I'll do Parenting with Grace in Mind specifically for ADHD as well. So I'm writing 2 books at the exact same time so that both of those can be out. And then I'll do some parent coaching courses with it as well. All right.
Dargan or Sandy, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I would like to say thanks for everyone, the enthusiasm that they brought, sticking with it, on a busy night. We know you have kids and meals and laundry and stuff to do, households to do, but by your stick-to-itiveness, you've shown this is an important topic and it's important for us. And we're going to be putting out, we have a series of these workshops, and we'll be working through state associations and group leaders to get, communication out to you on kind of, the next episodes, the next topics. So, by all means, send us ideas of what you would like, what you need. We really feel like our purpose in life is to empower the parent, to educate the parent so that they can enable the calling of the child, whatever that may be. And if removal of learning struggles enables that child to be called to do more things, then we want to be part of that. And these kinds of educational programs are a big part of that. And so anyway, we're humbled by your attendance and participation, and just be on the lookout through your groups for additional resources that we're going to provide. Sandy, you got anything else?
Nope, you wrapped that up really, really well. We just want to thank you guys all for being here. We really love being able to speak with you. And for those of you that this is maybe your second or third workshop with us, thanks for keep coming back. We really appreciate that. Rebecca, we're going to be sending out the video recording of this. So, if you want to listen to it again, you're going to get that in your email tomorrow. Again, reminder about the $59 assessment offer for tonight only. So that link went out, and I'm sure Rebecca will pop it in one more time for you if you want to take advantage of that. That includes an assessment, which is going to be either in person or online, whichever is the most convenient for you, as well as a consultation with one of our center owners so that we can help you troubleshoot and get to the root cause of any learning struggles. So it's a good combination of things to help you and empower you as a parent and teacher in your home. We want to thank you. Thank you, Dr. Amy, for being with us tonight and taking time out of your evening. And as you're saying goodnight, just know that we appreciate you, and be on the lookout for lots of information in your email box tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.